The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Federation Council buzzed with agitated voices, each one trying to rise above the cacophony. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered in the vast, dome-shaped room, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of evolutionary paths. The crystalline Cthar strategists hovered in tight formation, their faceted bodies refracting light in patterns that conveyed their growing anxiety. Bulky Vraxian warriors, their biomechanical exoskeletons humming with barely contained energy, pounded their reinforcements into the council tables. The ethereal Xylar diplomats floated in gentle clouds of luminescent gas, their whispered thoughts rippling through the collective consciousness of the gathering. At the center of it all stood Supreme Commander Zixnath, the ancient leader of the Federation, whose segmented, insectoid body towered over the others. The commander's compound eyes reflected the holographic display showing the latest disaster, the complete erasure of the Centauri cluster from the timeline. The Chronomoths have devoured another sector, Zixnath announced, the translator nodes around the chamber converting the clicks and whistles of their speech into the standard galactic tongue. That's the third major stellar civilization to vanish from causality this cycle. A Cthar representative named Tixel rotated its crystalline body in a gesture of mathematical certainty. Our quantum probability shields failed completely. The Chronomoths simply ignored them. It's as if our most advanced technology doesn't even register in their perception of reality. Then we must strike directly. General Vrax of the Vraxian Armada slammed a reinforced limb against the table, leaving a dent in the supposedly indestructible material. Our bioweapon platforms can target the temporal flutter patterns. If we cannot defend, we must attack. A gentle ripple passed through the Xylar Collective. Their spokesperson, a being called Luminax, formed a more coherent shape to address the council. We have attempted psychic matrices to communicate with these entities. They have no recognizable consciousness our empaths can touch. They are like wounds in reality itself, feeding on timeline junctures. Our abilities only seem to attract them. The debate grew increasingly desperate. Reports flooded in from all corners of the galaxy. Scout ships vanishing from existence, planetary histories being randomly rewritten, elite fleets erased when attempting to intervene. The Chronomoths, named for their wing-like temporal distortion fields, were growing bolder, consuming larger and larger portions of space-time. Throughout the chaotic proceedings, one representative remained silent. Dr. Eris Thorne, the human ambassador, sat quietly at the far end of the council chamber. Unlike the military commanders and scientific experts that made up the other delegations, Thorne was merely a xenohistorian and xenolinguist, an academic, not a warrior. His species had only joined the Federation 50 years ago, barely a moment in galactic politics. Humans were still considered primitive newcomers who had only recently mastered basic warp technology. As the debate raged on, Thorne focused intently on an antiquated personal device, scrolling through what appeared to be ancient textual fragments and corrupted temporal data streams that most considered meaningless noise. Occasionally, his eyes would dart to the main display showing the Chronomoth's feeding patterns, then back to his device, making subtle adjustments to his calculations. Cthar Commander Tixal noticed the human silence first. The crystalline being's logical mind found the anomaly worthy of mention. The human has not spoken, Tixal observed during a brief lull in the arguments. Does your species have nothing to contribute to this existential threat? Several representatives turned toward Thorne with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. What could this mammalian possibly understand about temporal physics? Scoffed a Vraxian subcommander. They're still struggling with basic warp engines. Perhaps they're simply afraid, suggested a Gronder representative, the squat, practical being shrugging its four shoulders simultaneously. Not unreasonable, given the circumstances. Thorne ignored them, continuing his work as the council returned to their increasingly desperate proposals. Then it happened. The main holographic display suddenly flickered, showing a massive temporal distortion enveloping Xantus Prime, the Federation's historic archive world, home to the collective knowledge of thousands of civilizations spanning millions of years. Impossible, gasped Commander Zixnath. Xanthus Prime has our most advanced temporal shielding matrix. The display showed the planet disappearing from the causality stream, its entire history unraveling like a thread pulled from a tapestry. The room fell into stunned silence. In that silence, Dr. Eris Thorne finally spoke. "There's a pattern to how they feed," he said, his voice calm and measured. All eyes turned to him. "The chronomoths are attracted to complex causal junction points, planets or installations where multiple potential timelines intersect and create temporal echoes." He stood, approaching the central display with unhurried steps. Using his personal device, he interfaced with the main system, overlaying a strange pattern across the map of chronomoth attacks. These entities aren't random. They're following forgotten ley lines of causality, pathways that only show up in certain ancient myths and in these energy signatures I've been tracking. Thorne highlighted several seemingly unrelated points across the galaxy. "Look at the feeding pattern. It's not strategic or opportunistic. It's ritualistic." The council members stared at the display, many seeing the pattern for the first time. Tixal's crystalline body vibrated with sudden comprehension. "How did you identify this?" the Kthar asked, genuine curiosity replacing dismissal. "Ancient texts from extinct civilizations." Thorne projected fragments of writings in long-dead languages. References to time eaters and causality demons appear in at least 17 separate xenomythological systems, spanning millions of years. All describe the same phenomenon. Thorne's fingers danced across his device, bringing up more data. But more importantly, they mentioned something else, a network of ancient conduits that once spanned the galaxy, structures that could manipulate causality itself. The survivors of previous chronomoths incursions used these to create what they called causal bait, a controlled paradox. The human looked up at the assembled representatives, his expression grave but determined. "I believe I know how to find and activate one of these conduit nodes. We could create a causality trap for the chronomoths." The chamber erupted in protests. General Vrax's exoskeleton flared with combat indicators. "This is outrageous. You propose fighting mythology with mythology. This plan violates every established principle of temporal physics," Tixal countered, its crystalline structure flashing rapidly in patterns denoting logical objections. "You're proposing to create a controlled paradox, something proven impossible by the temporal consensus treaties. The technology you describe was banned specifically because it's too dangerous." Commander Zixnath raised all four arms for silence. "Dr. Thorne, your theory is unorthodox, but we have tried conventional approaches. Tell us more about this plan." Thorne nodded and began to explain his desperate gambit. The dimly lit conference room felt oppressively small compared to the Grand Council chamber. 8 beings sat around a table designed to accommodate their varied physiologies, an impromptu task force assembled out of desperation more than conviction. General Vrax loomed at one end, his biomechanical armor clicking and whirring as he shifted impatiently. "This is a waste of precious time. We should be deploying the quantum arsenal, not chasing fairy tales." Across from him, Tixal's crystalline form pulsed with mathematical skepticism. "I have analyzed Dr. Thorne's theory from 73 different angles. It contradicts established temporal mathematics in at least 12 fundamental ways. Yet our established mathematics has failed to predict or counter the chronomoths," countered a young Xylar officer named Etheris, whose misty form coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape as she spoke. Unlike most of her kind, Etheris had studied ancient texts as a personal fascination. "I've seen references to these conduits in the scrolls of Axonis. They describe technology that manipulates causality at its root." Ambassador Dorn of the practical Gronder species tapped his thick fingers on the table. His species' reputation for pragmatism was well earned. "Results matter. Your safe methods have failed. At least this plan offers something new." Commander Zixnath entered the room, accompanied by Dr. Thorne. The human carried his ancient device and a small collection of physical artifacts, actual paper books and carved tablets, curiosities in an age of quantum data storage. The Federation High Command has authorized this mission, Zixnath announced, mandibles clicking with anxiety. We have no better options remaining. Thorne placed his materials on the table. The conduit node is located in the Vortex Nebula, approximately 17 light-years from here. It's a chaotic magnetic field region where normal physics behave. Unpredictably, that region is interdicted, Tixal objected. Space-time fabric there is too unstable for safe navigation. Which is exactly why the builders placed a node there, Thorne replied. The instability masks the node's temporal signature from entities like the chronomoths. The builders? General Vrax sneered. Another myth. The race that created the conduit network, Thorne explained patiently. They faced the chronomoths millions of years ago. Their civilization fell, but some of their technology survived. Aetheris drifted closer to examine Thorne's artifacts. The scrolls of Axones mention those who shaped rivers of time. Could these be your builders? Thorne nodded. Different names, same entities. Their technology operated on principles we've largely forgotten or deliberately abandoned due to the dangers involved. He activated a holographic map showing their destination, a dense, swirling nebula with anomalous energy readings at its center. The node appears dormant, but I believe it can be reactivated using specific resonance frequencies derived from these texts. And once activated, Ambassador Dorn asked, what exactly will this node do? Thorne's expression remained carefully neutral. It will create a controlled causal distortion, a paradox that will attract the chronomoths, but contain a specific temporal resonance that disrupts their feeding pattern. You're creating bait, General Vrax concluded. In essence, yes. Thorne met the warrior's compound eyes without flinching. But the bait contains the poison. A dangerous gamble, Commander Zixnath observed. How confident are you in this plan, Dr. Thorne? The human considered the question for a long moment. Confident enough to stake my life on it, which I will be doing as I intend to lead this mission personally. The statement sent a ripple of surprise through the room. Commander Zixnath's mandibles clicked rapidly, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. You are not a field agent or military personnel, the commander pointed out. No one else can interpret the activation sequences correctly, Thorne replied simply. The texts are fragmented, and many of the critical instructions rely on intuitive leaps between different mythological systems. Tixal's crystalline form vibrated with skepticism. Translation, guesswork, educated interpretation, Thorne corrected mildly. The kind that can't be algorithmically predicted. This is why your simulations can't validate my approach. It contains elements of intuition that can't be quantified. Commander Zixnath's compound eyes studied the human for a long moment. Very well. Dr. Thorne will lead a small team to the Vortex Nebula. General Vrax will provide military support. Scientist Tixal will handle technical analysis. Officer Aetheris for cultural and linguistic assistance. Ambassador Dorn for practical oversight. The disparate group regarded each other with varying degrees of doubt and resignation. The mission launches in 6 hours, Zixnath continued. The fate of countless worlds now rests in your hands. May the cosmic constants favor your endeavor. As the others filed out to prepare, Commander Zixnath held Thorne back with a gentle touch of one segmented limb. This plan of yours, the commander said quietly, translator nodes off. You've left something out, haven't you? Thorne's face remained impassive. Only the parts that would prevent the mission from being approved. Zixnath's compound eyes gleamed. I suspected as much. Is it truly as dangerous as I fear? More so, Thorne admitted, but no more dangerous than doing nothing. The commander nodded slowly. Then I place my trust in your quiet certainty, Dr. Thorne. Whatever you're not telling us, I hope it's worth the risk. So do I, Commander, Thorne replied softly. So do I. The Federation vessel Quantum Sentinel dropped out of hyperwarp at the edge of the Vortex Nebula. Through the observation viewport, the nebula looked like a cosmic maelstrom, Swirling clouds of ionized gas in vivid purples and blues, shot through with lightning-like discharges of energy. On the command deck, General Vrax grunted disapprovingly. Sensors are already degrading. Magnetic interference is off the charts. As expected, Thorne replied, studying the readings with keen interest. The nebula's properties are what kept the node hidden for millions of years. Tixal hovered near the science station, its crystalline body refracting the nebula's light in hypnotic patterns. Navigation will be compromised once we enter the dense regions. We should establish a baseline return vector now. Ambassador Dorn nodded in agreement. Practical precaution. No point finding this node if we can't make it back to tell anyone. Aethere's misty form stretched toward the viewport, tendrils of luminescent gas reaching out as if trying to touch the nebula. I sense echoes, like whispers across time. This place remembers ancient events. General Vrax's exoskeleton clicked in irritation. Spare us the mysticism. We need coordinates, not poetry. Thorne interfaced his personal device with the ship's navigation system. I've identified a path through the interference. It follows what the texts call the Still River, a relatively stable corridor, through the chaotic magnetic fields. The ship's engines hummed as they pushed forward into the nebula. Almost immediately, systems began to falter. Displays flickered, gravity fluctuated subtly, and the hull creaked under strange pressures. Hull integrity holding, reported Tixal, but these stress patterns defy standard physics. Space itself seems folded here. As they penetrated deeper, the nebula's beauty gave way to an increasingly ominous atmosphere. Lightning-like energy discharges struck the ship's shields with growing frequency. Reality itself seemed to waver at the edges of perception. Detecting a massive structure ahead, Tixal announced suddenly. Dimensions? Uncertain. Readings fluctuate, but it appears to be approximately 15 kilometers in diameter. The view screen adjusted to show what lay ahead, and a collective gasp went through the command deck. The conduit node hung in space like a massive, multidimensional snowflake. Its structure seemed to exist partially beyond normal space, with sections appearing and disappearing as they watched. Constructed of an unknown dark material that absorbed rather than reflected light, it featured intricate geometric patterns that hurt the eyes to follow for too long. By the cosmic constants, whispered Ambassador Dorn. It's real. Of course it's real, Thorne replied without taking his eyes off the structure. The myths always had a basis in historical fact. As they approached, the node seemed to respond to their presence. Energy patterns rippled across its surface, and sections that had appeared dormant began to glow with a faint blue luminescence. It's activating, Aethere's observed, her misty form pulsing with excitement. It recognizes our approach, or it's preparing to destroy us. General Vrax countered, activating the ship's defensive systems. Be ready for anything. The ship's sensors suddenly blared warnings. Multiple objects were detaching from the node's surface, accelerating toward them. Defense drones, Thorne identified them. Automated security systems left by the builders. General Vrax's weapon systems locked onto the approaching threats. Permission to engage? No. Thorne's command was sharp and immediate. Any aggressive action will trigger the node's full defense protocol. We need to transmit the approach sequence. His fingers flew across his device, sending a complex pattern of energy pulses toward the incoming drones. The strange objects, each resembling a metallic polyhedron with constantly shifting facets, slowed their approach. What did you just do? Ambassador Dorn demanded. I sent a recognition code, a sonic pattern translated from the Axionic hymns, Thorne explained. It identifies us as maintenance personnel, essentially. The drones surrounded their ship, scanning them with beams of blue light that seemed to penetrate the hull effortlessly. They're reading our temporal signatures, Thorne explained, confirming we're not chronomoths in disguise. After tense moments, the drones retreated, taking positions around their ship like an honor guard. They're escorting us in, Thorne said. Follow their guidance exactly. The ship moved slowly through an opening that appeared in the node's surface, a massive hexagonal portal that hadn't been visible moments before. As they passed through, standard sensors failed completely. "We've entered a space with different physical properties," Tixal announced, its voice vibrating with scientific fascination despite its skepticism. "The laws of causality themselves appear altered here." Inside the node was a cavernous chamber that seemed larger than the structure's exterior dimensions should allow. Massive support pillars of the same dark material curved upward to meet at a central point, where a sphere of swirling energy pulsed like a heartbeat. The walls were covered in intricate carvings and symbols that shifted and changed as they watched. "Find us a docking point," Thor instructed. "We'll need to continue on foot." General Vrax looked at him incredulously. "You expect us to leave the protection of our ship?" "The activation sequence can only be initiated from the central control chamber," Thorne explained. "And our ship's energy signature would interfere with the node's more delicate functions." As the Quantum Sentinel settled onto a platform that materialized to receive it, Thorne gathered his equipment. "Ambassador Dorn, you'll remain aboard to maintain communications and prepare for our departure," Thor instructed. "The rest of us will proceed to the control chamber." The team exited the ship, stepping onto the platform. The moment they did, the artificial gravity and atmosphere of the node enveloped them, breathable for all their diverse physiologies, but with a strange, metallic taste that made General Vrax's sensory appendages twitch. "This way," Thorne indicated, following a path that illuminated itself before them with soft blue light. As they walked, ghostly images flickered around them, three-dimensional projections of events from different time periods. Battles between unknown species, civilizations rising and falling, stars being born and dying, all played out in silent tableaus. "Temporal echoes," Thorne explained. "The node exists partially outside normal time. What we're seeing are imprints of events captured by its sensors throughout history." "Including our future?" Tixal asked sharply. "Possibly," Thorne admitted, "but we wouldn't recognize it as such." Aetheris drifted through one of the projections, a scene showing humanoid beings in ancient ceremonial attire gathered around what appeared to be a smaller version of the node's central sphere. "The builders," she whispered. "These must be records of their rituals." "Not rituals," Thorne corrected. "Technological operations. What looks like ceremony to us was their method of programming the node network." They continued deeper, the path leading them through a series of chambers, each more strange than the last. In one, gravity reversed periodically, forcing them to time their movements carefully. In another, they witnessed multiple versions of themselves entering from different directions, temporarily out of sync. "The deeper we go, the more the node affects our perception of time," Thorne warned. "Stay focused on me and our immediate surroundings." General Vrax's biomechanical armor whirred as it adjusted to the strange conditions. "My tactical systems are experiencing severe errors. Time stamping is inconsistent." "That's normal here," Thorne assured him. "Rely on your organic senses, not your technology." Finally, they reached what appeared to be the central chamber, a vast spherical room with a pulsing energy core suspended in its center. Surrounding the core were concentric rings of the dark material, each engraved with shifting symbols and rotating independently of one another. Thorne approached a dais that faced the core, covered in what appeared to be control interfaces, though they resembled artistic sculptures more than technology. As his hands hovered over the surfaces, they responded with pulses of light. "The node recognizes human DNA," Tixal observed with surprise. "How is that possible? Your species didn't exist when this was built." "All humanoid DNA shares certain markers," Thorne explained without looking up from his work. "The builders designed their systems to recognize potential operators across evolutionary timelines." As Thorne worked, Aetheris drifted closer to the energy core, her misty form rippling with response to its emanations. "I can hear them," she whispered. "Voices, millions of them, across time." "Aetheris, maintain your distance," Thorne warned sharply. "The core contains compressed temporal information." Your psychic abilities make you vulnerable to being overwhelmed. The Xyler reluctantly pulled back, her form shuddering. They were afraid. The builders. They knew they couldn't destroy the Chronomoths completely. General Vrax, who had been securing the perimeter, suddenly activated his weapons. Movement detected. Multiple signatures, non-corporeal. Shadowy forms began to materialize around the chamber. Wispy, moth-like shapes that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Chronomoth scouts. Thorn identified them, his voice tense but controlled. Our activation of the node has attracted their attention. Tixal's crystalline body vibrated with alarm. Already? Your plan has put us directly in danger. Stand firm, Thorn commanded. Do not engage them directly. Their physical manifestation here is limited. The shadow moths circled the chamber, their movements erratic. Wherever they passed, reality seemed to waver and distort. They're testing our defenses, General Vrax observed. Tactical assessment. They're preparing for a larger incursion. Thorn's hands moved faster over the control surfaces. Then we need to work quickly. Tixal, I need you to channel energy from the ship to these specific nodal points. Aetheres, translate these symbol sequences. They're shifting too quickly for me to process alone. As they worked, Thorn gradually revealed more of his plan. The node wasn't just a bait to attract chronomoths. It was designed to create what the ancient texts call the causality paradox bomb. By synchronizing the node with both the energy signature of the chronomoths and the formation of a specific quasar that's about to ignite, Thorn explained, we can create a self-destructive causal loop targeted directly at the chronomoth's existence pattern. Tixal's crystalline structure flashed with alarm. That's far beyond what you described to the Council. Such a manipulation could permanently damage the fabric of reality in this sector, which is why I didn't explain it fully, Thorn admitted. The Council would never have approved. This is insanity, General Vrax growled. You're risking not just our lives, but potentially the entire galaxy on an untested theory based on myth. Not untested, Thorn corrected. The builders used this method before. It worked, but the cost was high, including their own civilization. The shadowy chronomoths grew more substantial as more gathered, their wing-like appendages creating ripples in space-time with each movement. We have no choice now, Thorn continued grimly. Either we activate the paradox bomb, or the chronomoths will consume this node, adding its power to their own. That would accelerate their consumption of the galaxy exponentially. Aetheres' form pulsed with empathic distress as she processed both the situation and the ancient symbols. He's right. I can feel the chronomoths' hunger growing. They sense the power here. General Vrax stepped closer to Thorn, weapon systems humming. I should end this now. Destroy the control systems before you can activate them. And doom countless worlds. Thorn met the warrior's compound eyes steadily. Your oath is to protect the Federation. This is the only way. Tixal hovered between them, its crystalline form vibrating with the clash of logical processes. The statistical probabilities are unclear, but the known alternatives have already failed. A sudden surge of energy rippled through the chamber as more chronomoths materialized, larger and more substantial than the scouts. They're beginning to manifest fully, Thorn warned. We're out of time for debate. Make your choice now. General Vrax's weapon systems powered down. Complete your work, human. But know that if we survive this, you will answer for your deception. Gladly, Thorn agreed, turning back to the controls. The manifestation of the chronomoths accelerated dramatically. What had been shadowy scouts transformed into a swarm of temporal predators, their true forms becoming visible, vast, moth-like entities with wings that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, bodies that pulsed with stolen time energy, and sensory organs that perceived reality in ways incomprehensible to normal beings. The swarm began to encircle the node, creating a spherical formation that isolated them from normal space. Reality outside their protective bubble began to warp and tear as the chronomoths started their feeding process. They're attempting to devour the entire node, Tixal observed, its voice vibrating with scientific detachment despite the mortal danger. The temporal distortion is exponentially increasing. Inside the node, systems began to fail as the chronomoth's feeding affected the structure's integrity. Ghostly echoes of past and future events flashed more rapidly around them, creating a disorienting kaleidoscope of history and potential futures. Thorn, now integrated with the node's control systems, issued rapid commands. His eyes gleamed with an ancient light as information flowed directly into his consciousness through the builder interfaces. Vrax, he called, voice oddly resonant. Reroute power from the defensive systems to the central core. Don't try to fight them directly. Use their own energy against them. The Vraxian commander, battle instincts overcoming his doubts, followed the instructions precisely. He manipulated his armor's interface to create an unusual energy configuration that captured the temporal distortions created by the chronomoths and channeled them back into the node systems. Tixal, Thorn continued. The safety protocols are preventing full resonance. Override them using the parameters I'm sending to you now. The Cthar scientist hesitated. These exceed all safe operational limits. The energy buildup could collapse into a singularity. That's the point, Thorn replied. Trust me. With reluctance born of desperate circumstances, Tixal bypassed the safety systems, allowing the node's temporal resonators to build energy beyond sustainable levels. Aetheris, Thorn called to the Xylar officer, create a psychic inverse shield. Mask our true intentions from the chronomoth's collective awareness. The misty being extended her consciousness outward, creating a subtle psychic barrier that reflected false intentions back at the feeding swarm. It wasn't deception so much as misdirection, showing them what they expected to see rather than what was actually happening. As the team followed Thorn's increasingly strange instructions, the node vibrated with building energy. The central sphere pulsed faster, its light shifting through colors beyond the visible spectrum. The concentric rings around it began to align in configurations that seemed to defy geometry. Outside, the chronomoths intensified their assault, sensing something was happening but unable to comprehend exactly what. Their feeding became more aggressive, tearing at the fabric of reality surrounding the node. Ambassador Dorn's voice crackled through their communications system from the ship. Whatever you're doing, hurry. The ship's sensors show the entire region is becoming temporally unstable. Reality itself is starting to unravel. Within the control chamber, Thorn had become the eye of the storm. His hands moved with uncanny precision across the control surfaces, his eyes reflecting the ancient light of the core. The node responded to him as if he were one of its original builders, systems activating that had been dormant for millions of years. We've nearly reached synchronization, he announced. The quasar is forming. The chronomoth's energy signature is at peak as they feed. This is our moment. General Vrax had fought in countless battles across the galaxy, but never had he felt such absolute uncertainty. What happens when you activate this? Bomb. A cascading causality reversal, Thorn explained, his voice distant as if part of his mind was elsewhere. The paradox will target the chronomoth's unique temporal signature. They consume reality by creating ontological contradictions. We're going to turn that process back on them. They'll consume themselves, Tixal realized, its crystalline structure vibrating with sudden comprehension. A perfect logical trap. Exactly. Thorn's hands hovered over the final activation sequence. Everyone, secure yourselves. Reality is about to become flexible. As the team braced themselves, Thorn initiated the sequence. The concentric rings locked into their final configuration, creating a geometric pattern that seemed to fold in on itself impossibly. The central sphere expanded suddenly, pulsing with blindingly intense energy. A wave of pure causality distortion erupted from the core, rushing outward through the node and beyond. Unlike physical energy, this was a wave of causal contradiction, a focused paradox that targeted the very nature of the chronomoth's existence. The chamber shuddered violently. Gravity fluctuated wildly. Time itself seemed to stutter and skip around them. General Vrax's armor locked into emergency stabilization mode. Tixal's crystalline form developed stress fractures as conflicting timelines tried to assert themselves. Aetheris's misty body dispersed and reformed repeatedly as her consciousness struggled to maintain coherence. At the center of it all stood Thorn, seemingly untouched by the chaos, his eyes glowing with the same ancient light as the core. Through him, the node directed its impossible weapon with surgical precision. Outside, the swarm of chronomoths reacted to the paradox wave. Their feeding process reversed catastrophically. Instead of consuming reality, they began to consume their own temporal existence. Their multidimensional forms contorted as they tried to escape the logical trap, but the more they struggled, the more deeply they became entangled in the paradox. One by one, the massive entities began to fold in on themselves, their stolen time energy erupting in silent explosions of causality as they were erased not just from the present, but from the entire timeline. Their death throes sent shockwaves through reality, creating a storm of temporal distortions that battered the node. Inside the control chamber, systems began to fail catastrophically. Sections of the ancient structure collapsed as the paradox wave rebounded through the node itself. "We need to leave," General Vrax shouted over the cacophony of reality tearing itself apart. "The structure is failing." "Not yet," Thorn replied, still connected to the control systems. "The process must complete or the chronomoths could regenerate." The team held their positions against all instinct, watching as the massive swarm of chronomoths disintegrated into nothingness. The void they left behind was not empty space, but a scar in reality itself, a region where time and causality had been permanently damaged. Finally, the central sphere pulsed one last time before dimming to a subdued glow. The concentric rings slowed their rotation and the violent shaking of the chamber subsided. Thorn collapsed to his knees, the connection with the node severed. Blood trickled from his nose and ears, but he managed a weary smile. "It's done," he whispered. "They're gone." The journey back to Federation space was solemn and quiet. The team had survived, but not without cost. Each carried the psychological scars of what they had witnessed, reality itself being wounded and healing imperfectly. The nebula surrounding the node now bore strange, permanent distortions, areas where causality operated differently or not at all. As they approached the edge of Federation space, their communications system activated with an incoming message from Xantus Prime, the archive world that had been erased by the chronomoths. "It's back," Ambassador Dorn said in disbelief, checking the navigational systems. "Xantus Prime has returned to the timeline." Tixal's damaged, crystalline form vibrated with cautious optimism. The paradox must have reversed the chronomoths' feeding. The worlds they consumed are being restored to the causal stream. General Vrax remained silent, his compound eyes fixed on Thorn, who sat quietly observing the stars. The human's calm composure had not wavered throughout the entire ordeal, and that disturbed the warrior more than anything they had faced. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Federation Council was silent as Dr. Eris Thorn completed his report. Unlike the chaotic meeting days earlier, no one interrupted as he provided a precise, measured account of their mission. He carefully omitted the true nature of the causality paradox bomb, describing it instead as a targeted temporal disruption that had successfully neutralized the chronomoth's threat. Commander Zixnath's compound eyes studied the human carefully. "The nebula suffered permanent damage, according to your report." "Yes," Thorn acknowledged. "A regrettable but unavoidable consequence. The fabric of space-time in that region will remain scarred for millennia." A murmur passed through the assembled representatives, a mixture of relief at their survival and disquiet at the implications. "And you believe all the chronomoths were destroyed?" asked Icthar Elder. "The primary swarm, yes," Thorn replied. "It's possible isolated individuals exist in distant regions, but their collective consciousness has been shattered. They no longer pose an existential threat to the galaxy. The news of restored worlds and star systems brought jubilation, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of unease. Many representatives cast wary glances at Dr. Thorne and, by extension, at humanity itself. General Vrax stepped forward, his massive form commanding immediate attention. The Council should be aware that Dr. Thorne's methods were unconventional. He manipulated forces that our own laws and treaties explicitly forbid. Yet they worked, countered Ambassador Dorn pragmatically. When all our advanced technologies failed. At what cost? Demanded a Vraxian subcommander. Reports are coming in of temporal environment impact throughout the sector. Some planets report causality echoes, events repeating or occurring out of sequence. The inhabitants of the Tyros system claim to remember two distinct historical timelines simultaneously. Tixal, still bearing visible damage to its crystalline structure, rotated to address the Council. These effects are troubling, but temporary. Our analysis indicates they will fade as space-time heals itself. And if they don't, the question came from a representative of the Heliox Confederacy, their luminous tentacles twisting with anxiety. What if this solution has created problems we cannot yet comprehend? The chamber divided into factions. Some praised Thorne as a savior of the galaxy. Others demanded investigation into his methods and called for restrictions on human involvement in sensitive Federation matters. A few extremists even suggested quarantining Earth entirely, viewing humanity as too dangerous to allow free movement among the stars. Throughout the heated debate, Thorne remained characteristically silent, observing the political maneuvering with detached interest. Commander Zixnath finally raised all four arms for silence. Dr. Thorne's actions, however unconventional, saved countless civilizations. The Federation owes him, and humanity, a debt of gratitude. The ancient leader's compound eyes fixed on Thorne. The High Command would like to offer you a position as Strategic Operations Director. Your unique perspective could be invaluable in addressing future threats. The chamber fell silent, awaiting Thorne's response. To everyone's surprise, he shook his head. I appreciate the offer, Commander, but I must decline. My methods aren't suited to committee oversight. I would, however, accept a research position at the Xenoarchaeological Institute on Arcturus IV. Their isolation would allow me to continue studying the ancient texts and temporal anomalies without interference. Ambassador Dorn gave a rumbling laugh. Turning down power to bury yourself in old texts. Perhaps humans are more alien than we thought. As the council session concluded, the diverse team that had faced the Chronomoths found themselves together one last time in a quiet alcove overlooking the Federation capital. General Vrax's biomechanical armor whirred softly as he approached Thorne. I still don't understand how you knew it would work. The risks you took, that you forced us all to take, were unconscionable. Yet you followed my instructions when it mattered most, Thorne observed quietly. Because there was no alternative. The warrior's compound eyes flashed with lingering anger. But I watched you during the mission. You weren't guessing or hoping. You knew exactly what would happen. Thorne met the general's gaze steadily. I interpreted the evidence available to me. Nothing more. Tixal drifted closer, its damaged crystalline structure catching the light and fractured. Patterns? No, there was more. The node responded to you as if you were familiar, as if you understood it on a level beyond mere interpretation. The scientist's tone held reluctant respect. I have run 73 distinct analyses of our experience. None can fully explain what I observed. Aetheris, her misty form coalescing nearby, added gently. When I touched the minds within the node, the echoes of the builders, I felt a recognition when they encountered you. Not as an individual, but as a pattern they knew. Thorne smiled slightly. Temporal resonance creates many strange perceptions. Ambassador Dorn snorted. Still keeping secrets human? Even now, some knowledge is better kept compartmentalized, Thorne replied, especially concerning forces that could destabilize reality if misused. The group fell silent, each contemplating the implications. Finally, General Vrax extended a limb in the Vraxian gesture of reluctant respect. I still don't trust your methods, Thorn, but I cannot argue with results. The Federation lives because of your intuition. Thorn accepted the gesture with a nod. Perhaps our species will surprise you again in the future, General. That, rumbled Vrax as he turned to leave, is precisely what concerns me. One by one, they departed, back to their worlds, their commands, their research. Each carried away a piece of their shared experience, a fragment of understanding about forces beyond conventional science. And each found themselves changed by their encounter with both the Chronomoths and the quiet human who had somehow known how to defeat them. In the years that followed, Dr. Eris Thorn became something of a living legend within the Federation. Respected, feared, consulted on rare occasions, but mostly left to his isolated research. Occasional reports filtered out from Arcturus, full of strange experiments with temporal mechanics and the discovery of additional builder artifacts. But the Federation leadership, remembering both his triumph and the disturbing methods employed, carefully monitored but never interfered with his work. The scars in the Vortex Nebula remained, a permanent reminder of the wounds reality itself had suffered. Temporal scientists studied the region from a safe distance, developing new theories about the nature of causality based on the strange phenomena observed there. Some claimed to detect faint echoes of the Chronomoths still reverberating through the damaged space-time, ghosts of the entities trapped in recursive causality loops. 10 standard cycles passed. The galaxy settled back into its rhythms. The Chronomoths became a historical footnote for most species, a terrifying memory pushed aside by more immediate concerns. Then, at a routine meeting of the Federation Security Council, alarms suddenly blared. A massive energy signature had been detected emerging from the depths of intergalactic space. Something vast, ancient, and utterly alien even by the diverse standards of the Federation. The chamber erupted in panicked discussion as preliminary reports flowed in. Whatever approached was neither ship nor known life form, but something that defied classification. An entity that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, bending light and matter around it in impossible patterns. Commander Vextherian, who had succeeded Zixnath as Supreme Commander years earlier, silenced the chamber with a sharp gesture. The insectoid leader's compound eyes surveyed the representatives grimly. Our standard analysis protocols have failed to identify this entity, Vextherian announced. Its approach vector will bring it to the core worlds within 14 standard cycles. All attempts at communication have failed. Is it another temporal predator? Asked a representative, fear evident in their harmonic voice. Like the Chronomoths? Unknown, replied the scientific advisor, a newer generation Cthar whose crystalline structure pulsed with analytical patterns. The energy signature is different, but equally beyond our understanding. Ambassador Lorne, who had succeeded his parent Dorn as the Gronder representative, tapped thick fingers impatiently on the council table. We know of one being who might understand this. A reluctant silence fell over the chamber. Everyone knew who Lorne meant. Commander Vextherian's mandibles clicked softly. A communication channel has already been opened to Arcturus 4. We await Dr. Thorn's response. The main display activated, showing a sparse, book-lined study. Dr. Eris Thorn sat at a simple desk, examining what appeared to be an ancient artifact, a small, geometrically complex object that glowed with a familiar blue light. Though a decade had passed, the human appeared almost unchanged, perhaps a few strands of gray in his dark hair, the only concession to time. Thorn looked up at the camera, a slight smile on his face. He didn't appear surprised by the interruption, nor did he ask about its purpose. Instead, he gently set the glowing artifact aside and leaned back in his chair. Commander Vextherian felt an involuntary shiver run through his exoskeleton. The human's calm was somehow more unsettling than any panic would have been. Dr. Thorn, the commander began formally, the Federation faces. I know, Thorn interrupted quietly. I've been expecting this. The artifact I was studying when you called is related to what's coming. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Vextherian's compound eyes narrowed. You knew this threat was approaching? For how long? Thorn's slight smile never wavered. That's a complicated question when dealing with nonlinear entities. Let's just say that certain patterns have been emerging in my research for some time now. Can you identify what approaches? Demanded the scientific advisor. Yes, Thorn replied simply. But explaining it would take more time than we have. What matters is that I believe I know how to address the situation. Another ancient weapon? Ambassador Lorne asked sharply. Another wound in reality, like the Vortex Nebula? Thorn shook his head. Something more elegant this time. But I'll need resources, specific ones. I'm transmitting a list now. Data flowed across the Federation networks. The scientific advisor's crystalline structure flashed with shock as they reviewed the requests. These materials, this equipment, some of it violates our highest security protocols. Yes, Thorn acknowledged calmly. Similar to last time, Commander Vextherian studied the human carefully. The Security Council will need to deliberate on these requests. Some may be impossible to grant. Of course, Thorn nodded. But I should mention that my analysis suggests we have less time than your 14 cycles. The entity is capable of accelerating its approach once it detects our activity. The commander's mandibles clicked with agitation. How much less time? Perhaps 5 cycles. Perhaps less. Thorn's expression remained imperturbable. Vextherian turned to confer with the other council members, their whispered debate intense but brief. When he turned back, his decision was made. We will provide what you've requested, Dr. Thorn. A courier ship is already being dispatched to Arcturus 4. Thank you, Commander. Thorn's gaze shifted to the glowing artifact on his desk. One more thing. When your courier arrives, please ensure they're prepared to transport me as well. This situation will require my direct involvement. As the communication ended, a heavy silence fell over the chamber. Ambassador Lorne was the first to speak. We're putting the fate of the Federation in his hands. Again, Commander Vextherian's compound eyes remained fixed on a now empty screen. We have little choice. But I find myself wondering, is Dr. Thorn our greatest asset, or merely the first human to reveal what their species is truly capable of? The question hung unanswered in the air. Somewhere across the stars, Dr. Eris Thorn returned to his examination of the ancient artifact, a faint smile playing across his lips as he prepared once more to save a galaxy that could never fully understand him or what he had become.